And we're live. Hello. I actually made a longer, uh, less structured version of this video yesterday, I think, but I didn't feel like it conveyed the things I wanted it to convey. So I thought I'd come in a bit more prepared this time to talk about being a highly sensitive extrovert. And I think maybe where I went wrong last time is I tried to apply experiences that were a bit more specific to me to other people, like logically speaking. So let's just do this all over again, but better. So the reason that this topic felt like it was something I needed to talk about here was because the more I get into the cognitive functions, the more I notice people in my social circles who identify as introverts, but they seem to be kind of like me and extroverting a lot of their energy and their judgments. I don't mean judgments like harsh negative judgments, but just like putting forth like value statements openly. So I'm noticing, I think, a lot of ENFJs that think they're introverts, probably ESFPs or just EPs in general, EFPs are less likely to think that about themselves, just maybe because of stronger FI. But I can't see why it's impossible, But, considering I'm an ENFJ and ENFJs aren't FI preferers, I think a lot of this content will be kind of more directed at us, but I could see it applying to other extroverted feelers and maybe even extroverted thinkers. Maybe. I did date a couple of sensitive ENTPs before, but that sensitivity I think looked a little non-traditional or like not typical what you would think of sensitivity, and even sensitive extroversion is already like an atypical narrative anyway. So yeah, let's jump into it. So if you're wondering if you're a highly sensitive extrovert, I think the overarching hallmark would probably be feeling drained immediately around certain types of people. I know for me, people who are very interested in surface level interactions, and that's not a criticism of that working for some people, but for me it doesn't, and it's not something I can really keep up with. And I have a hard time turning the conversation into something else. And like sometimes people don't want that conversation to shift. So I get drained very, very fast, sometimes instantaneously around people like that. But despite this, there is this almost overwhelming, the word overwhelm will come up a lot. This need to speak your mind, or I guess in the case of an EFP, to like actively live your truth, despite feeling like it's going to be too hard, or there are too many people getting you down, just generally feeling like a lot of external obstacles to living externally, if that makes sense. So I guess also what this looks like specifically for me as an FE user, I am extra prone to absorbing people's emotions. It's not that I necessarily confuse other people's emotions for my own. because it's not like my emotions always match up with someone else's, but I'm definitely very affected by the emotional state of a person, especially of a room. Um, and I think people can misunderstand how draining that can be for some. I mean, it's certainly energizing when it goes well. And I wouldn't say it's draining in the sense that it would be draining for an introvert. So I used this example in my other video, and I'm going to attempt to use it again. But just so I'm really interested in biology and human anatomy. It helps me understand my own experiences and what other people are going through and how to help them better. Like, I'm really interested in holistic health. So, for me, that involves understanding the psycho-spiritual elements of health, but also the more scientifically grounded things. And I, as a maybe a weak TI user, TI inferior, the technical stuff gets interesting to a point. Like, I'm really down with biology and everything, but and those classification systems. But once I start to get into like pharmacology, pharmacokinetics, pharmacodynamics, it starts to get a bit harder. And then once I'm like getting into chemistry and atoms and ions, I want to punch myself in the face. And it feels like my brain gets all fuzzy. I get like a bit antsy, but yet fatigued, and I need to withdraw after engaging with that kind of information for too long. I wouldn't say that as an extrovert I get drained in that way when interacting with others. It's more like drinking 5 cups of coffee in a row, and not knowing what the fuck to do with yourself. So, I'll be in a room full of people, and there will be like conversation happening between others, social dynamics unfolding, like, oh my god, like Sydney just looked at Kevin and squinted at the same time. She looks kind of pissed off. Like, what's the context behind that? Oh my god, is this because Kevin didn't show up to the meeting on time last week? I'm making it sound like a work situation. I don't even have a job right now, but you know what I mean? I feel like as an ENFJ, like, always tracking those kinds of scenarios, and it's like almost rather than a radio what's that? Rather than radio static in my brain, it's more like being hopped up on adrenaline in a way. And there's a certain level of like hyper focus that that comes in, which brings more of a paradoxical lack of clarity in a way. It's not that I can't make out what's happening in my environment or that I don't really care to. I care too much, and there's too much detail, and I'm seeing all of it, and I need to stop. And I guess that's a good segue to talk about sensory overload. So it's not just people and their dynamics that can be overwhelming for me, and for other highly sensitive extroverts. It can also, the environment itself can be really overwhelming, like the physical surroundings. I'm autistic, right? And I don't want to hear your comments about how you don't think I'm autistic. Like, I'm not here to fucking argue that. But anyway, so that comes with a degree of sensory sensitivity, like, automatically. I feel like amongst the introversion extroversion dichotomy, the sensory overload versus sensory seeking dichotomy is often split up the same way. Like, introverts are overwhelmed and extroverts are underwhelmed. And there are grains of truth to that, but it's not split down the same axis at all. Like that axis, that two sides of the same coin can exist in one person. So I, and even, for the same stimulus, like I can seek out social engagement, like I was just saying, and I was also just saying that I can become really overwhelmed by it too. So the dichotomy exists, but the way, but the way that it's split up is kind of untrue. Um, at the very least, hyper reductive. Um, so, okay, examples for me. I was always given shit in school for not giving enough examples, so I'm trying my best. Lighting is a big one for me. I know you wouldn't think, like, for me, SE is my my auxiliary function. So you would think that this is something that, like, INFJs experience more, or even INFPs, because they are kind of checked out from their environments more so altogether, with their only sensing function being inferior and it being SI, like, blah, blah, blah. And, my best friend, I'm pretty sure he's an ESFP. I was convinced he was probably maybe an ESFJ for a while, but exposing myself to more examples of ESFJ energy signature has really kind of helped me discern what that looks like. And I mean, he uses a lot of FE the way that I use a lot of FI, I think. So it was hard to determine at first, but ultimately I think he prefers FI in interactions. So basically, the reason I'm saying this is because being an ESFP, he actually would be an SE dominant. But he does get overwhelmed by the environment sometimes. Definitely not as easily, but it happens. And, you might be sitting here thinking, like, oh, well, everyone gets overwhelmed by their environment at a certain point. And that's definitely true. But I think the reason to draw a distinction between highly sensitive extroverts and maybe those who aren't so much is because, the distance between feeling fulfilled and feeling overwhelmed is a lot shorter. So your fuse is a lot shorter, and you can swing from being content with your environment and being feeling bombarded by it really fast, to the point where it confuses a lot of other people and even yourself. And that plus, what was I going to say? Oh, I wrote this down. Damn it. Oh, right. The bodily consequences of that overwhelm are more dire. So even for my ESFP friend, like, he if he overexerts himself socially, especially when that socialization is physical, because I think he gets a lot of positive energy from social interactions that might be more physically demanding, but I think working a corporate job, even though he deals with material that he likes, is really, really fucking draining, and kind of leaves him wound up a lot, and then he comes crashing down really hard from being wound up, rather than just feeling like a sense of fog and heaviness from the get-go, if that makes sense. What else? So, what those sorts of things lead to Oh shit, I didn't give my example of sensory overload. Okay, if you want it, a big one for me is lighting. I did say that. I don't know if I expanded beyond that point. But I feel like overhead lighting, especially fluorescent, but even like, you know, those nasty overhead lights in like inside your average house is like, it's not that it gives me a headache, though I know for a lot of people that's a big trigger. Um it brings me into depression almost immediately. And I don't mean like feeling kind of sad. I mean like a deep sense of like gloom and despair that starts off quietly and just bubbles up in my chest. Like it's a really strange whispering to experience, triggered by something seemingly so benign. So for me, like I have to avoid that sort of lighting as often as possible. Like even lamps are better, but I prefer really like ethereal light as much as possible. So I have like fairy lights strung around my bed. I have a salt lamp, just things like that. It really, really helps my state of mind. Candle burning is like the best for my mental health. It's not as practical, obviously, but it also helps me feel spiritually connected too. So, I mean, that always helps. Basically, oh yeah, okay. So, what these sensitivities can often, their consequence can often be, is needing more downtime than is typically expected from an extrovert, and that downtime can still include having other people around or talking to them, but just downtime from like specific commitments. So for me, like as an ENFJ, I feel like there's this expectation that I'm always working, I'm always on the go, I'm always um, realizing my dreams, and I'm definitely always thinking about those things. But am I actually always physically doing them? No. And I mean, a lot of that just has to do with the plain fact that I am physically disabled, but um, it's my mobility isn't that restricted. Um, and I was gonna say my fatigue isn't that bad, but I think I'm just measuring it against like extreme bouts of fatigue I've had where I couldn't even lift my torso up. So I mean, maybe it is pretty bad, but I do struggle with fatigue and like sluggishness a lot, even though internally um, I feel really like a lot of the time. It's a weird internal conflict, and I think a lot of highly sensitive extroverts do feel that way, like a bit more of a push and pull between um, a relenting sense of energy and wanting to draw more energy versus feeling bogged down in some way. Um, and you know the body versus the mind is a false dichotomy as well. They're not as separate as you think because your nervous system is literally, it extends through your entire body, first of all, and second of all, um, it's a sensory system that very much has to do with, I don't know how else to put this, but your bodily senses. So keep that in mind. Um, you know, I have a hard time working or going to school because I would feel so overly charged up from, um, but also wiped out at the same time from, um, like going to work or whatever, going to class once, that I struggle to like take my work home with me, if that makes sense, especially. So I would need like, it was really hard for me to go to school 5 days a week because even though I craved that stimulation growing up, especially that intellectual stimulation and just like the social fullness in my environment. I just like, I also couldn't bust my ass to school because like I have ADHD, and like that doesn't mean I'm an ENFP. Shut up. I have ADHD, and like managing time is really, 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 really difficult for me. And I just felt like I lacked executive function a lot of the time, and just like it was hard for me to organize myself and like continue repeating the same kind of like mundane expectations that revolve around that good intellectual social stimulation. So I would want to, or would feel like I would have to, you know, do a day of school or one shift at the store and take 3 to 5 days off. Like I would need that much time to recharge after activities. And it's hard because I like actively want to keep doing those things. But the point of this video wasn't just to outline the ways life can be hard for a highly sensitive extrovert, especially an ENFJ as such, but also to talk about how one can take care of themselves. And these are some tips that I have learned through my own experience. So see if they resonate with you. It might not hurt to try them out. I guess one of the big ones so far has been for me to be highly, highly selective with my friend groups. I think I used to chase a lot of friendships, relationships too, but even friendships and friend scenes that were just purely energizing, but not necessarily accepting, not encouraging in a complete way, not non-judgmental. I keep thinking of one in particular that I was involved in, like one crowd a while ago, and you know, I was always having lots of fun, but I wasn't emotionally safe. I was judged a lot. You know, my best interests weren't looked out for. People cared more about my ability to bring fun to the table than to actually be real with, I think. I know. So, sure, I might not have as easy access to social engagement, but oh my God, the quality is so much better. And quality social engagement will satiate you for longer than incomplete, mediocre social engagements. I guess this kind of brings me to self-care, including but not limited to bubble baths. Sometimes self-care isn't luxurious. Sometimes it's like feeding your fucking self. So, I mean, it's important to schedule alone time for any extrovert because we may forget that we have to do that, or feel like resistance, like, no, I don't wanna. And too bad. Everyone needs to spend time alone to just recenter their sense of self. And you need a sense of self in order to make healthy decisions for yourself. I learned that the hard way. But also, it's totally okay to schedule self-care things with friends. Like, I've had friends come with me to appointments. I've scheduled appointments for my friends and gone with them. Like, community care is really undervalued in modern capitalist, like, et cetera society. So, cool if you feel like you don't need it, but ultimately it makes you a better person because it makes you give a shit about the people around you, and sometimes the people around you need it. So, yeah, there's nothing wrong with doing that. Like, I really struggle with cleaning up my environment, even though I have a deep, deep desire for a spotless one. Gathering the energy, the spoons, as some would say. Um, that's a disabled community term for finite energy that you have to budget. But yeah, gathering that energy to do that kind of self care is hard. Cooking too. I haven't eaten yet today. Just because I fucking hate cooking. I realize that it's a really valuable skill, and it's a large part of culture sharing, all these things, and like helps take your mind off shit, but like I still hate it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Um, oh, I have a viewer. Cool. Hello. Um, and anyway, what I was saying is, yeah, so I will often call someone, either audio or video chat, to help fill up that social need, and like charge my battery, my crystal, if you will, to have the energetic output to actually get that shit done. Um, this can even extend as far as calling upon like friends or loved ones to come over, or to talk on the phone, or video chat, whatever, during more difficult times as well. I'm trying to strike a balance between not being overly reliant on people to process my feelings for me or with me, but also don't shame yourself for needing to do that. You know, that's not inherently an unhealthy thing on its own, and it's not less valuable. So it's okay. Also, when you're experiencing really intense emotions, a lot of animals in the animal kingdom do this, where when they experience something particularly intense or even traumatic, like they will shake. And shaking is actually a really important biophysiological, psychophysiological, neurological, what have you, mechanism to process emotions, because it's doing something with that energy, and it's allowing yourself to experience it in a safe, contained way. I'm shaking myself as I'm saying this, to let it out and allow your body to let those emotions, because emotions are like literally energetic experiences, to just like flush it out. You don't need to carry that shit around with you. You need to experience it and you need to process it, but it doesn't need to become burdened deep in your body, manifesting as muscle cramps or autoimmune disease months to years later, you know? And if you already have that stuff like me, like, it's really important to lessen your allostatic load. Some of the more verbal stuff I do to process hard feelings is processing out loud. If you're an extrovert, you probably come to realizations better when you're talking them through with someone else, or experiencing them in the presence of someone else, maybe. But I know for me, when I hear myself say something, I'm much more aware of the nuances and realities and not so realities behind it. So, if you can't always rely on someone else to be there for you when you need that, every single time. So it's important to kind of almost parent yourself in those moments, and practice doing it as often as possible. Like, I experienced a really rough situation a few months ago that triggers a lot of shame in me. I think my internal response previously has been to say, like, oh, whatever. He was so fucked up for doing that. And just to get mad and like use that anger to like help alleviate the blame and the shame from myself. But I think that while that anger is righteous and valid, I know that I'm using it as a mechanism to not think about it anymore, because I just feel this like clenching in my body, and I know that's like me going like, no, I don't want to. And I mean, it's okay that those moments come up, but I realize it's taken me a long time too, but I've kind of finally realized that just because I am having strong emotions doesn't mean I'm processing them properly. Um, so I've kind of started to say things to myself like, it's okay that I'm feeling this anger right now. That's really normal. What happened wasn't your fault, and you don't have to carry around this guilt. You don't have to feel like shit about this, but it's okay that you do right now. So just that straddling that line in a way between like validating what you're feeling, because you're feeling it. There's no sense in trying to pretend like you're not, like it's fucking there. And also giving yourself permission to move on. We don't do that for ourselves enough. So, and I guess what I will leave you all with today is for any highly sensitive extroverts out there, especially ENFJs, ESFJs too. Gosh, I feel like I forgot about ESFJs during this video. I'm so sorry. But just watch for patterns of feeling, like, and I don't just mean like raw emotion, but just like any feelings at all, like any internal sensations that correlate with foods that you eat, household and personal products that you use, hormone cycles that you may be experiencing, especially if you have menses, medication or supplement changes, sleep changes, all of these things, if you're highly sensitive, affect you big time. And I know for me, like, it was really hard for me to accept that until I started buckling down and actually tracking those patterns. If you have a period, you can use a period tracker. Like, there are food diary apps that exist, mood diary apps that are easy to use. Like, just because you don't have a reaction to something right away doesn't mean that it's like automatically fine or healthy for you in that moment. I don't want to focus on getting really restrictive, but at the same time, like, there's a huge toxic load in our air, in the products that we use, even though they're deemed safe. Like, they're not going to kill you right now or anything, but like, it's a lot for the body to process that historically we haven't had to process, to explain it in value neutral terms. So just like be mindful of those things if you can, and you're not going to catch everything, and that's okay. But also, on the same side of that coin, track the things that make you feel good, in the same way, and or I track them in the same way, I mean, and allow yourself to seek those things out, because, well, I hope I don't have to explain that to you. You deserve it, I promise. So I think I'm going to end there. But thank you so much to whoever this one person is that's watching. Yeah. Whatever time it is, wherever you are, I hope that your day is both peaceful and energizing. Bye.